Eastern, I bring to you a short conversation with an expert, a thought leader, a doer in the realm of innovation for the built environment. My name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing at Shadow Partners, and I'm bringing to you today another Encore presentation, but this may have been one of the most important conversations we've had on Shadow Shorts to date. This is my conversation with Tom Scarangello. He's the executive chairman at Thornton Tomasetti, and we talk about making innovation approachable. Innovation can be big, it can be scary. How do we make innovation inside of our organizations approachable? Tom has some really great thoughts about this concept, so I think you'll really enjoy this conversation, my conversation with Tom Scarangello, executive chairman from Thornton Tomasetti. Enjoy the conversation. I'll be back again tomorrow with another Shadow Shorts. Hey, welcome back to Shadow Shorts. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And the promise of Shadow Shorts is that every weekday at noon Eastern, I bring to you a conversation, a short conversation, that's Shadow Shorts, but a conversation with an expert or thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation yesterday for a couple of reasons. One, because this topic came out in my my graduate level class last night, and two, because I think what we're going to touch on in this conversation is really important when we look at the industry, the profession as a whole, and maybe ask the question, why don't we see more innovation? So I'm joined today by Tom Scarangello. He's the executive chairman at Thornton Tomasetti. Tom, I really appreciate you being here. I've loved the conversations that we've had, and we'll leave baseball out of this because it's a little bit of a sore subject at the moment.
Oh, please do.
But I'm really looking forward to this conversation about innovation. And resistance to change certainly is a piece of what we'll talk about. But how do we make innovation accessible? How do we make it something that more people can get on board with? So thanks for joining me today, and I'm interested to hear what you think about how we get more people involved.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I've loved the conversation we've had leading up to this, and I love the way you dubbed it approachable innovation, because I think that's the biggest challenge we have right now. If you look at the opportunities for innovation in our industry and true innovation, I don't think certainly in my career, I haven't seen a time where where the breadth, the speed, just the magnitude of opportunities for innovation throughout the whole, kind of asset life cycle, and touching on everybody, not just engineers and architects, but the owners, the contractors, labor. The breadth of what we see out there is at the highest I've ever seen. And it's very different than other periods of innovation that we've had, or I could say the other period of innovation, because I don't think we've had a lot of periods of innovation. And I think the biggest challenge that we're seeing is how to kind of wrap your hands around it, and then how to recognize the challenges to the different types of innovation that opportunities we have. And that's where I feel like I spend and in conversations with you, others are spending a lot of their time, because the opportunities are there, but how do you bring them to bear, and how do you get people to understand the impact and embrace the challenge and the opportunity?
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And before we went live, we talked about this. I mentioned this in the intro, that this question sort of came up with my graduate students last night. And the question was, why don't we see more, right? What's holding, whether it is, like you said, whether it's architects, engineers, contractors, anybody in the CRE world, why don't we see more innovation? And one of, my immediate thought was, well, because again, from, my experience from the architecture point of view is, well, there's so many people in the office that have their heads down. They're focused on, they're focused on the next deadline. Hey, we've got to get this package out by Friday or whatever it is. And I know you had some thoughts on that before we went live. I think there's a huge percentage that are mired in the day-to-day, and maybe don't have the luxury. That might have been how you put it, actually, before we went live. What's been in your experience over the course of your career in who it is accessible to and or approachable to, and who it's not.
Well, it's and looking back on my career, and like I said, I'm at a great point now where I can focus on while I'm still involved in projects. It's usually a very kind of broad level, and I have those moments to step back. As I said to you earlier before I got on there, I'm not sitting there spending months checking shop drawings where I have barely the time to do anything but to do that work. See, when you get to sit back and look at it kind of holistically, I looked through the kind of history with my period of time, and there's always been a resistance, and it hasn't been a resistance because people aren't smart and they're not ambitious.
Right.
It's just, I believe, very hard because of the number of people that it takes to actually drive real change in industry. What we do is an incredibly collaborative profession, and in whatever we're doing in the design and construction world. And to make change, you can't just do it just with a couple of people saying, "Hey, let's do this." You need to get really buy-in from a broad range of stakeholders, everybody, the client, the architect, the engineer, the contractor, all the way through. And sometimes you can drive some things top down. But if you think of the biggest innovative change in the last 20 years, and it really was, I always kind of play it down because it wasn't as innovative as we made it out to be. As we went from analog to digital, starting 20 years ago. Everybody was, touting it as a big change in the industry, which it was, but it really wasn't true innovation because we were just adopting a technology that the aviation industry had done a decade or more before that. And I'd say it went forward in a kind of the traditional way in which we do things, where there were some true believers, they got on board and they did it, and they kind of dragged the rest of the industry forward until everybody said, okay, because there was always the resistance, why are we putting this into whatever platform there was? Why should I spend all this extra money in training and everything else? It just works fine the way it is. But in that case, 20 years ago, we all were gravitating to one or two or three platforms. We were all, and when I say we, it was really more designers and to some degree contractors. And owners were seeing the benefit of it, but they really weren't necessarily driving the change unless it was the GSA or somebody who was putting
Sure.
forth those kinds of things. Today it's very different because I think it's really true innovation. It is new products and other things that are coming forward that are touching every aspect and every stakeholder, like I said before. And I think one of the things that make it less approachable, and I've been thinking about this for a while, is the fact that it's kind of like a fire hose of things coming at us. And you go to conferences sometimes, and it's actually, this came to me about a year ago when I was in a conference, and I sat there and I listened to all these different presentations, and it was like 100 over a couple of days. And at the end of the day, I'm saying, these all three fit into three categories, and it was process innovation, performance innovation, and product innovation. And I'm convinced that actually every time I see something new, I'm saying, all right, which one of those categories? And some of them fall into one or two. And I think if we started to think around it, I'm not saying those have to be the categories, but if we start to kind of bring them in there, because they're not all as easy to implement. I would say a product innovation is probably the easiest because we're kind of used to that. When a new product comes out in our industry and kind of we test it and we check the ROI and we do things, people will embrace it if it ticks the boxes, and it's easier to roll into the process and into what we do. And then performance innovation is probably kind of close to that, where it's really kind of, I call performance is where we're kicking the tires on data. All of these platforms that are out there that are helping us take all of this data since we've digitized what we do and make more sense out of it. And I think people have been, that's something that they can do. It may be an issue about changing the software they're using or training people, but it's something that they can get their hands around. But the third one, which is kind of process innovation, that's the real tricky one, because that's where you're actually, that's where you get back to this collaborative enterprise that we work in, that requires all the stakeholders to get on board and everybody to kind of reassess how they work, where they work, all of those things. And that's the ones when I see those companies or approaches, while I think they're the most exciting, I think they're the ones also that really take the most effort and the most thought to kind of really figure out how to implement them.
So when we think about the process in innovation, if we take that bucket specifically, you look at an organization like Thornton Tomasetti or anybody else that you're collaborating with or against for that matter, who's driving the process information? Is it a top down? Is it somebody in the middle? Is it somebody that says, "Hey, I need this to make my job better"? Where do you see most of that being driven from?
Well, I think you see it at all, all levels of the life cycle of assets and with all people. I mean, I'll give you an example of a couple of companies that we've looked at. One, take a company like Assembly OSM or Falk Builder, the people who are looking at kind of modularizing the process. I mean, that is the biggest process change you can imagine, right? It's everything from how do you procure, what comes first, second, or third, how do you change the whole construction process, and those require a completely rethinking of from everyone from the owner all the way down to labor and everything in between. But even ones that are hitting different parts of the life cycle, like I look at Test Fit, which is that kind of AI enabled early stage planning and execution. It's really rethinking who needs to be in the room when you're laying out a new site, and can we do rapid prototyping quickly and without having to kind of assemble a whole team of designers and others. Can we put that in a way and make it a tool that almost anybody can bring to the table to speed up or expand the way in which we evaluate opportunities. And then one that we've been involved with is T2D2. This is a platform that we did where we're looking at exterior envelopes of buildings and using AI and just trying to rethink the way that you care for and manage those assets. There's a challenge because you've got to go to a building department that has a cycle and says, oh, we're going to check the buildings every 5 years. Well, is that the right way to really manage a building? Guess there's a lot of stuff happening in those cycles. So it's not just going in and change. You have to change be part of the whole, kind of system as to how things are being managed and maintained. So I think those big process ones are really, and the resistance to change, as I said earlier, I've been reading a great book that actually was in a conference. I heard the professors who wrote the book from Northwestern University. It's called The Human Element, and it's about the friction that happens when you're trying to drive innovation. And they identify 4 areas: inertia, effort, emotion, and what they call reactance. And all 4 of them, some of those would be in different areas of resistance depending on the change. But if you're making a process change versus a performance or a product change, I think all 4 of those come into bear, because it's inertia is like our industry. We've been doing it this way for years, and we have all of these. We have to get all these people on board to make the change. The effort is huge. Like I said, it's not just, hey, we'll bring in a new piece of software and train people, or we'll convince an owner that the ROI on this product is great and they should consider using it. Right? It's a much bigger effort and lift to kind of change the process. The emotion of it all. I mean, this is what people, the way they work their whole careers, and you're suddenly saying, oh, no, you should work differently now. And then the last one they call reactance, which I would describe as, the issue that says like, who are you to tell me what to do, right? Kind of that kind of approach. And there's a lot of that out there. Like, I've been doing this for years. I know better than you. It's like people who have the answer when you mention AI and they say, oh, I don't like artificial intelligence. I like real intelligence. And I'm like, oh, come on, please. All right, let's, but I get it, right? There's a reactance to like, I'm resisting this because I recognize the challenge here. So I think, those, if we can break down make these different categories more approachable and say, we recognize there's a lot in the fire hose, but there's really not that many. There's really only 3 things we're changing. We're changing products, we're changing performance analytics, the way you approach that, and we're changing the process. And yes, and recognizing that this friction, this resistance is real, and how do we actually get people over those hurdles?
Yeah. So let me ask you this: if all 4 of those things, if those are the frictions, which makes complete sense to me, and I think as you're describing it, I'm sort of thinking through examples in my head. Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. It's the friction, and we talk all the time in different contexts about removing the friction. So how do we remove the friction in terms of innovation, right? In the way that you've talked about, is it mentioned in the book? I'll put the title and the authors up on the screen
they give
again.
lots of examples. Now, the book wasn't written around our industry, so there's a lot
Sure.
of examples outside of our industry which are great. And like I said, it's The Human Element. So that you Google it, you'll find it. It's easy and it's a quick read and good. But I say, in our industry, I'd say, and let's start off with the hardest one, right? With the process innovation. If you recognize, to me, inertia is, you're going to have to deal with that regardless, right? And that, in some of that is really the firm, the people. Do you have, 10 years ago or more, Thornton Tomasetti embraced the big goal to be the global driver of change and innovation in our industry, right? So when I look at inertia at our firm, I would say, all I have to do is talk to somebody and say, remember what our big goal was? Let's put that inertia aside, because our big goal is to drive innovation. So, get over yourself. We have to do this, right? But the other ones, effort, emotion, reactance, those aren't as easy to address. I think if you're a firm that says, hey, I want to do this, you could, or a company, and let's think about it. Who out there that's been successful says, no, I don't want to change. I want to stay exactly the way I was. So I think the inertia part is probably the easiest. You can just speak to people's inherent, at least, aspiration to change and be on top of things. But I think the other three, you can't minimize the effort. You can't minimize the emotion behind it. It's like, that this is really changing someone, the way they've worked, how they define themselves and the value they bring to the table. I mean, look at test fit, right? You're saying to somebody, well, thank you. You lay out parking garages, but I'm going to use this tool that can do it in a fraction of the time. I'll come back to you when I have a pretty good layout, and I'll ask you to weigh in at that point. That's a real threat to somebody who's said, no, I know how to lay out parking garage. That's I've done that in my career, right? And so I think recognizing those things and actually starting the conversation with the people who are not going away, we're augmenting what they're doing. Now, I don't see any of the talent going away. I use this, the example I give is the old one, years ago when I'm so old that, spreadsheets showed up. And I used to do, the calculations by hand, and suddenly, spreadsheets showed up, and my boss, Charlie Thornton and Richard Tomasetti, I started being able to do things quicker. And because I was using a spreadsheet, that wasn't cheating. That wasn't like, and if I wasn't using it, it was silly. These tools they just allowed me to be more efficient. They freed up my time for kind of more creative parts of what I was doing. And I think that's the conversation we have to have, is like, if you love to just sit there and crunch numbers, great. But if I'm giving you a tool that actually allows you to do that quicker, and then, kind of, solve the problem or look at different solutions, I think that's what most people literally enjoy. So I think it's a conversation with all the stakeholders, and it's recognizing that these issues around these categories, like I said, product innovation, I think it's about just finding people and making the ROI argument. Process innovation, it's just, how do we not embrace the fact that we now have this data, and we have to actually, there's tools out there that'll let us, address that, how that data can actually make us more efficient. But the process ones are the ones that I think we have to sit with people and recognize that their resistance is not just, kind of being obstinate. It's built into the fact that we're human.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's, what struck me as you were explaining that is there's a mindset shift, right? In order for us to, there's this approach, the idea of approachability, obviously, but it's going to require a mindset shift for some. Some are, we've talked about that already. Some are on board, some are champions of change, and some are threatened, and probably everything in between. And so there will be a mindset shift probably with some that's required in order to buy in, get the buy-in, get the embracing.
And some don't have the time, like we talked about it earlier. I mean, we're sitting here, and the luxury of being able to sit here and carve out in the middle of my day time to have a conversation about this with you is a luxury that I didn't have 20 years ago, or even probably 10 years ago, right? And recognizing that, you have to have the time no matter where in your career, but you can't assume that people have it at the moment you want to engage with them. If somebody's got a deadline at my firm, and they have to, and on Friday they're getting the model out to the client, or they're meeting a deadline, it's not my time to go approach them about some innovation or some technology or some idea of changing the whole process in the way that they work, right? You have to find those moments. Maybe it's at the beginning of a new job where you say, hey, let's step back for a second. We're starting a new project. Let's think about what we can bring to bear. Can we change the process here? Is there a new product we can bring to the client? Is there something we can do with data that's going to allow this new project to move in a different direction? Are we heading into construction and we want to use where are the moments where you can step in where those other barriers, the ideas of effort, emotion, and reactance maybe are a little lower because the people have the time. But I know there are moments if somebody came by my desk and tried to bring something to me, I'd look up at them and go, "Get out of here!" I'm like, I don't have time for this, right? This is all cool
Yeah.
stuff, Tom, but I've got a deadline to meet and profits to make. So
Yeah, yeah, that's an excellent point. A few weeks ago, I talked with Ty Nguyen from Hensel Phelps and Diverge about the culture of innovation, and this is it strikes me as we're having this conversation. We need to plug the two of you together into one of these conversations because it's so important what you're talking about, what Ty was talking about, and there's things that you're bringing up and I think that approachability and the timing of it is a really, really important point. So I really appreciate you spending this time in the middle of the day. Like you said, it's a luxury that you have and I have that not everybody has. So this has
well,
been
I
a
mean,
great
I'll give a
conversation.
pitch for you. I'll give you a pitch for your summits as well. I think, there's so many summits and so many conversations out there. But I think part of that is also that when can you break out and have engage and have
Mm,
those kind of conversations? And I think, again, we need to have more people who can find the time for those, and we have to make sure that those times we get together are valuable because once you break, if you take some time out of your busy calendar to take the time to think about this, it has to be kind of crafted in a way. That's why I was saying the idea that to think about what are these big buckets of ideas and trying to make it approachable. Because if you walk away from a conversation, whether it's a summit or a call like this, and you say, okay, I now have more tools to be able to approach this. That to me would
yeah,
be the goal. Whether there was anything that jumped out as a particular solution that you embrace, that's great. But I think it's really about more how do you walk away from these conversations with some tools on how do you bring them to your organization or to your project or to your client or whatever it happens to be. Um,
yeah, yeah. That's an excellent point. I think you hit the nail on the head right there. And if you're listening and or watching and you're wondering what's the summit that Tom's talking about, I put the URL in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. It's shadowsummit.com is the website for our summit that's coming up. It's the seventh annual Shadow Summit this year. It's in Atlanta, October 24th through 26th. And we're going to have conversations like this. We go deep in the weeds. It's called a summit for a reason. It's conversations. It's a time for us to really think about and set the agenda for innovation for the built environment in 2024. It's not your typical conference. It's not your CEU learning unit time. It's a time for us to really embrace innovation, and it's a time to think about these ideas like approachability. So shadowsummit.com is where you can find more info on that. There's an apply button towards the top of that page. So thanks for bringing that up, Tom.
yeah.
If you want to
Well,
know
I
more,
think it'll be really interesting because you think of just what's happened in the last year, what's happened in the last 6 months.
yeah,
Large language models suddenly landed, right? And I think
yeah,
have added a whole other stream to this conversation
right,
that didn't exist 6 months ago. I mean, this is why I said the breadth and speed of what's happening,
yeah,
and it's not. I don't believe it's necessarily its own category. I think it filters into all three of those categories. Process change. You can bring it into process. You can bring it into
hmm,
products. You can bring it into performance. But I think if you're not paying attention to the large language model revolution, you're going to miss something. And you're not, unlike the digitization of what we did 20 years ago. You're not going to have 5 or 10 years to catch up.
right,
You're going to have a year or two, and if you ignore it, you're going to be ignoring it at your peril. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that finds its way into a summit like yours, where it wasn't
hmm,
even in the conversation a year ago.
right. Yeah, yeah, that's an excellent point. And as you will not be surprised to learn, we will have a whole panel on generative AI and how AI is and machine learning as well as impacting shaping the shaping of the built environment, and you know that's everything from marketing to deliverables and everything in between. So yeah, look for that. And the book that Tom has referenced is the Human Element by Laura Nordgren and David Schonthal. And that's up in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen right now. If you want to go to Amazon or wherever you buy books, you can look for that. So, Tom, thanks a lot. This has been a fun conversation. It's been an important conversation, and we'll have to dig into it more in the future. I appreciate you doing this with me.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jeff, and look forward to talking more. And for others, people who are out there, love to have the conversation. Like I said, I have the luxury and the passion for it, just like you do, Jeff. And so look forward to talking to other industry folks who are as passionate about this and trying to make it more approachable. I think if we all get together, we'll be able to do that because this is going to require a team effort to make this happen. And I think the whole industry is going to have to embrace it. What's nice is we're seeing that. We're really seeing
Yeah,
leadership
yeah,
step
I
up
think
at
you're right.
every level of all the major firms, competitors, and others. It's really exciting to see for the first time, I think, in my career, where you see the industry really stepping up and embracing this. But it's going to require a lot of people getting together and figuring out how to get rid of that friction and move forward. So
Yeah.
hopefully this has been a little bit of help in that conversation.
Absolutely. I think you've got the ball rolling. So I appreciate that. And if you want to connect with Tom, he's approachable. ThorntonTomasetti.com is the URL for the Thornton Tomasetti website. But Tom is also on LinkedIn. You can find him
And you
around
can you
the
can email me at tzs@thorntontomasetti.com. Easy
there you
enough.
go.
Yeah, Scarangello is a long one, so I took a shorter one to throw it in there. So
Very good. All right. Again, thank you. And for those of you out there that are listening, thank you for joining us. I'll be back tomorrow with another Shadow Short, and we'll continue talking about innovation for the built environment. Till then, have a great day. Tom, thanks again. Appreciate you. And we'll see everybody tomorrow.